confession full of tears. Jimin and Jungkook reveal their true relationship. That night, the atmosphere was different. Unlike the usual concerts, it is not like a celebration full of laughter and happy shouts. That night, there was a nuance that was hard to explain, like the air containing a load, as time seemed to slow down when the two figures who had always looked close suddenly stood in the middle of the stage with a gaze that could no longer be hidden. Jungkook and Jimin, two names that for years have been the center of attention, two people who have always been associated with each other, finally talking about what has been a big question mark for many. Their relationship has long been the subject of conversation. Are they just friends? Are they just group mates? Or is there something more than that? The fans, especially ARMY, for years tried to read every gesture, every look, every sentence spoken between them. But that night, all the speculation seemed to find its way to an answer, albeit in such an electrifying way. Before that moment happened, no one really realized that the night would be the one that changed everything. The concert went on as usual. The BTS members performed with full energy, performing songs that burned the spirit and touched the soul. However, as the stage neared completion, as each member began to give closing speeches for ARMY, the atmosphere slowly changed. Jungkook, with a voice that sounded heavier than usual, held onto the microphone and turned his gaze to Jimin. Among the cheering crowd, their gazes met each other, and in an instant, the entire stadium seemed to become silent. There was no music, no moving stage lights, only silence hanging in anticipation of what Jungkook would say. "I want to say something I've been keeping for a long time," Jungkook said slowly, his voice trembling slightly. "Something I've been covering up, even from all of you." Jimin, who heard that sentence, began to feel his chest tightness. He knew that whatever Jungkook would say next would be big. He didn't know why, but his heart was beating so fast. Jungkook continued, "People always ask about our relationship. People are always guessing, composing their own stories. But all this time, I just kept quiet. I think as long as we know the truth, that's enough." But it's not that easy. Jungkook's voice began to grow hoarse. He looked at Jimin with eyes that began to glaze over. "Hyung, all this time, you have been my home. You're where I come back from. I was once afraid to say this. I was afraid you'd walk away. I'm afraid everything will change. But now I realize I can't keep hiding." Jimin tried to smile a little, but his eyes were already getting wet. He knew exactly what this meant for Jungkook. It takes a lot of courage to say it in front of everyone. "I don't know what to call our relationship. Best friend? Brother? Or something more than that? But I know one thing. I can't imagine my life without you by my side." Jungkook continued in a trembling voice. The audience began to sob. Someone covered his mouth. Someone hugged a friend next to him. The ARMY, which has been supporting them all this time, knows very well that this moment is not just an ordinary recognition. It is an honesty that comes from the deepest place. Jimin finally picked up the microphone. His voice was low, almost inaudible. I've been afraid too. I'm afraid you'll walk away if I demand too much. I'm afraid our relationship will be ruined if I force this feeling. But you're always there. You always come back even when I kick you out with my harsh words. And I realized, I don't want to lose you either." The crying broke out. She lowered her head, covering her face, while Jungkook walked up to her and hugged her tightly in front of everyone. The atmosphere of the stadium was broken by the screams and cries of the ARMY, who witnessed the most frank moment between their two loved ones. "I end that embrace." Jungkook whispered words that only Jimin could hear. "Whatever they say, whatever label they give you, I just want you to stay by my side." Jimin held back the hug tightly, as if he didn't want to let go. "I'm always there for you. Always." The confession does not give a label. They never mention the word best friend, brother, or spouse. They simply express what they feel, without restrictions, without definitions. And maybe that's what makes the moment feel so real and touching. Their relationship cannot be confined to one word. They are each other, and that's enough. After the concert, the news of their confession became a big conversation. Fans around the world wrote thousands of messages of support, and BTS itself chose not to provide further clarification. They let the story live on as it is, a story that is left open, the meaning of which only the two of them really understand. In a live broadcast conducted a few days later, Jungkook briefly touched on the moment. With a calm smile, he said, "You don't need to know everything in detail. Just know that we take care of each other." That alone is enough. Jimin, who was sitting next to her, nodded and added, "Our relationship is our home. Not everyone should understand the contents of the house." This sentence made the ARMY even more touched. They understand that there are things that do not need to be announced in detail. It is enough to feel with the heart. And that's exactly what happened to Jungkook and Jimin, a relationship that went beyond labels, beyond speculation, beyond the need for formal recognition. Every time they performed together, there was a different little vibe. A touch of the hand, a brief hug, a deep gaze, everything speaks more than words. They become a reflection that a strong bond does not always have to be explained. It is enough to be present. It is enough to strengthen each other. That night, when they uttered a tearful confession, Jimin and Jungkook not only revealed their hearts to ARMY, but also to themselves. They no longer hide, no longer restrain themselves. They let the world see them for what they are, with all their fear and courage. That recognition became an important part of their journey. Not as the end of the puzzle, but as the beginning of a new story, one in which they no longer hide feelings, a story in which they dare to walk together with a wider heart. As time passed after that tearful night, Jimin and Jungkook's journey grew warmer in the eyes of the fans. Although they never explicitly labeled their relationship, the closeness that they show in each subsequent moment becomes precisely the most sincere answer. They do not need a narrow definition, because what they live is a relationship that is much deeper and much broader than anything that can be described in words. Each of their interactions after that confession became more and more meaningful. Small backstage hugs, smiles that are thrown in the middle of rehearsals, to laughter that breaks out in a simple moment. All of this is evidence that what they said that night is a truth that does not need to be disputed. ARMY increasingly understands that behind the status and spotlight, what they see is two humans grasping each other in the midst of a harsh world that demands them to always be perfect. In several interviews after the concert, Jimin and Jungkook still chose to keep the boundaries of their privacy. For them, recognition is enough. They no longer need to explain the details of their relationship to the public, because what matters to them is that they have spoken to each other heart to heart. On one occasion, Jimin once said with a shady look, "We are not a story to be solved by others. We are a story we live on our own." ARMY understands and respects that. They no longer pursue clarification, no longer impose answers. They chose to support, chose to love unconditionally, because what they witnessed that night was not just a moment between two idols, it was a moment between two hearts that finally dared to speak. Jungkook also said that what happened that night became one of the most important decisions in his life. He said, "Honestly, I thought maybe I would regret saying it in front of everyone. But it wasn't. I'm sorry I kept it for too long." It was a new night for both of them. They no longer have to pretend to be strong, no longer have to harbor everything on their own. They've opened up to each other, and they've shown the world that their togetherness is part of who they really are. They no longer live in the shadow of conjecture, but in complete honesty. That concert, that confession, those tears all became a memory that would never go away from ARMY's heart. In fact, until years later, that moment remains one of the most special parts in BTS's travel history. Not out of scandal, not out of sensation, but out of pure sincerity. In the end, Jimin and Jungkook teach everyone that a genuine relationship doesn't always have to be inexplicable.